Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Snare Drum Mastery 101 course. I'm your instructor, Josh Lappin, and today we'll be going through the objectives of the course and what you will get out of this course once you complete the course. To start off with, I just want to briefly go over the course objectives and some of the things you'll be learning in this course. This course is primarily designed for beginner to intermediate drum students who need help getting started on the drums. What this course mainly covers is snare drum technique, including how to read snare drum music using standard musical notation. It also covers proper techniques such as stick grip and practice tips and techniques, and it also includes the 40 standard drum rudiments and how to use those properly and how to play those properly. This course also can be used by drummers who currently play by ear but who are wanting to learn how to read music. The advantage of learning to read music is that, number one, it makes you a better, more rounded musician. The thing that I really like about being able to read music is that it gives you a lot of options for learning new things. If you want to learn some new things, you can go and order you some books about different techniques, different styles. And with the ability to read, you can go in and learn about anything you want. And you can also share ideas by being able to read. That would also mean you would know how to write music, and you would be able to share your ideas with others, other team members, band members, other people, whoever you want to. This course is also for other musicians who maybe want to give drumming a try and they just don't know how to get started. Well, this is a good way to do it. And finally, it is also for people who want to teach music and they want a kind of a comprehensive course on what they should be teaching and how to teach it. We'll get started with some other things here in just a second, but as you can see, some more of the objectives here. We'll also be covering a little bit of dexterity, which is helping you develop right versus left hand leading, and a variety of other topics here, most of which we've already talked about. Just a quick rundown of the lesson summaries for those who might be interested. The first thing we'll talk about in lesson 1 is just the basic notes as applied to the drum set, how they are subdivided, and how to use time signatures, and just introduce some of the basic time signatures that you find in most popular music. And we'll also begin with some basic reading exercises to help you become familiar with the notes and how to use them properly. In lesson 2, we'll start introducing the drum rudiments. First, of course, would be the single stroke roll. We'll continue to build upon the things we learned in lesson 1, adding eighth notes to what we already learned in lesson 1. Then lesson 3, we're going to add a couple more single stroke rudiments, as well as give you some practice tips on developing your single stroke roll, as well as tips on using a metronome. And we'll continue to do a little bit more with eighth notes. And then lesson 4, we're going to continue to add, you'll see the pattern. We'll pretty much introduce a couple of different rudiments at the beginning of each lesson for you to practice and begin to learn. In lesson 4, we're going to start adding some more things like dynamic cymbals and some additional music theory used and primarily for this course in snare drum, but is used throughout all music. And we'll continue to build upon our reading exercises. That's another thing you'll see throughout all the lessons is we will have reading exercises with each lesson. Lesson 5, we will have triplets and introduce the Moeller method. We'll discuss 3/4 time. In addition to that, we'll add some more music theory and some more reading exercises in 3/4. Lesson 6 will cover the 5, 6, and 7 stroke rolls, which are double stroke rolls. We'll also talk about 2/4 time signature and continue to discuss musical theory and notation as we continue to build our foundation. Lesson 7, we'll do 9, 10, 11, to 13 stroke rolls, also double stroke rolls, introduce 6, 8 time signature, and provide some reading exercises in 6, 8. Lesson 8, we will continue to build on the double stroke roll rudiments with the 15 and 17 stroke rolls. We'll introduce the 16th note and rest and provide exercises related to those. Lesson 9, we'll start working on paradiddles, single, double, and triple paradiddles. Those are fun. Some of my favorite rudiments there. And we will also continue to build upon our 16th note foundation. Lesson 10 introduces flams, including all the different flam rudiments such as flam accents, flam taps. In this lesson, we'll discuss the traditional grip and some ways that you can use traditional grip in your playing. And we'll have some exercises that use the flam in various time signatures. Then in lesson 11, we will continue to add more flam rudiments with the flam acute, flam paradiddle, and single flam mill. And at this point, we're going to start having exercises that incorporate a variety of our rudiments that we learned so far. One of the main ones will be the double stroke roll, in which you'll be able to do long rolls through various measures, which is something you would use in a setting like a marching band or an orchestra, those kind of settings. So we'll start working on exercises that include those. Lesson 12 will continue to finish up the flam rudiments with the flam paradiddle diddle, paddle fly fly, and Swiss Army triplet, as well as continue to build our foundations with the long rolls, using them with a combination of different kinds of notes, 8th and 16th. Lesson 13 will begin to explore the final flam rudiments, as well as start using the 7-stroke roll through exercises. Lesson 14, we're going to introduce the drag, single drag, double tap drag, lesson 25, and single dragadiddle. A pretty good chunk of drag movements in that lesson. And we'll also have reading exercises that use 9 and 17 stroke roll. And then finally, lesson 15, we would finish up the remaining of the 40 standard drum rudiments, finishing out the drag rudiments. And we'll have some final exercises that use a little bit of everything that we've learned so far in the course. And that, my folks, would be the Snare Drum Mastery 101 course for you, the introduction. Hello everyone, and welcome to lesson 1 of the Snare Drum Mastery 101 course with your instructor Josh Lappin. And today we're going to get started with lesson 1 in the course and start exploring all the topics and techniques in lesson 1. Lesson 1 is kind of our foundational course here. It's where we're going to introduce all our notes that we're going to be using throughout the rest of the course, and all the corresponding rest and kind of just get you started looking at the different notes and getting used to them, and start you off also with some basic reading exercises. So in lesson 1, to get started, let's go ahead and introduce the notes that we're going to be using throughout this course and throughout this lesson as well. As I've said before in the introduction, just a quick recap here. It's important to learn how to read notation in music for a variety of reasons. One of them is that it makes you a better, more rounded musician, and it also gives you a way to learn more about your instrument. If you get stuck, you need to learn something new. If you can read, you can go buy books and videos that will explain different techniques and styles, and you'll be able to go through those on your own and learn a lot more about music and drumming than you would if you just had to try to pick it out by ear. There's nothing wrong with playing by ear. I think everybody needs to know how to do that as well, but reading gives you an advantage, and it helps you be more valuable as a musician, because other musicians can write their ideas and communicate them to you effectively. Also, too, there will be some passages in certain drumming patterns that'll be complicated enough that you won't be able to distinguish them with your ear alone. But if they're written down and you know how to read, you'll be able to figure out exactly what that other drummer was doing. All right, so let's get started then. Learned about the notes. These are primarily the notes that we're going to be using in this course here, and the notes that you'll see throughout most music, definitely in the drum set, but even with other instruments. Now with drumming, for this course, we're not going to be doing anything with pitch, which means since we're pretty much only be playing the snare drum, we're not going to concern ourselves with trying to notate the notes on the staff in a way that would notate pitch or a different instrument. So that's one thing you won't have to worry about in this course. In future courses you will, but in this one it's going to be pretty straightforward. Here are our basic notes that we're going to use. We will have our whole note, which just looks like kind of a circle here. Our half note looks like a circle, but it has the stem. This one happens to be going down. They can go either up or down. If it went up, it would be on this side. Quarter note looks very similar to the half, but it is filled in completely here. The eighth note has the little flag here, but you can see it's got a curve, which indicates it's an eighth note. 16th note, double flag there, and then 32nd note has the triple flag. Music can also go up to 64th, but for the purposes of this course, we were not going to explore those at this time. All right, so with the notes, there has to be a corresponding rest as well, because you can't always play. Sometimes you have to stop, and sometimes you want to stop for either rest purposes or for musical purposes, so we have to have a way of notating that as well. So, like I said, each corresponding note has a corresponding rest. So this is the whole rest. One of the ways I remember it is that it is usually under the line. So that means it kind of looks like a little hole in the ground. Half note is over the line. Sort of looks like a little hat. Quarter note rest looks kind of like a little lightning bolt. This is what the eighth note rest looks like, and it's going to follow the similar pattern to the actual note. The rest will have a flag that corresponds to it. This has got the one little marking. 16th note has a 2, and 32nd has the 3. All right, so these things by themselves really don't mean anything until you actually assign a value to the note. And when you assign a value to a note, that's when you're going to be able to actually make some rhythms, make some patterns, make some music. Also, too, before we get going, we're going to introduce the note values as they would be in a 4/4 time signature, which we'll get into more detail, especially when we get into the reading exercises. It'll make a lot more sense. But for now, just a quick overview of the time signature. 4/4 means that you're going to be using the quarter note as your bass note, and that there should be an equivalent of 4 in each measure. The measure is just the subdivisions here. Got a line here which indicates measure, another measure, measure, measure. All right, so the value of the notes. This is kind of how that the notes are subdivided. In 4/4 time, it would make a lot of sense, but you can also subdivide them in other time signatures as well. So for 4/4 time, using the whole note, this is our whole note. Remember, we have to be able to equal up to the 4. That's our goal, to equal up to 4. So these have to equal up to 4 in some way. So a whole note equals 4 all by itself. So one whole note in 4/4 time signature would take up the whole measure. Now the way to play that we're going to demonstrate later, but just know that, like I said, it's got to equal up to 4 some way. Now the half note would be the division of the whole note here. So as you can see, it takes 2 half notes to make a whole note. Remember, goals equal 4. So this is how the whole note would be constructed. It takes 2 whole notes to make, 2 half notes to make up a measure. If we divide the half note again, we'll get quarters. And if we're talking about 4/4 time, it'll take 4 of those to make up your measure, which is where they get the 4/4 time signature, based on the quarter note. If we divide the quarter notes again, each, as you see, as you divide them, the values get smaller, which we're going to need because as you go down the pyramid, you get more notes, which indicates you're playing more notes within a constrained space. So that would indicate somewhat of speed, but that would also be determined by your beats per minute. Okay, so eighth notes, it's going to take 8 of those, as you can see. Now we'll talk about this in another lesson, but this is just how it's broken out right now. Eighth notes, and then you divide the 8th note again, and you would get 16th. And you can see that, I'm not going to get into the 16 note theory right now, but if we go and count each of these, I'm not going to go all the way through it, but you would eventually end up with 16 there. And then you just divide them again, and you would get 32nd notes. So this is a handy little chart to see how the notes get subdivided and how the different values of the notes start to form. And like I said, right now, this may not make a lot of sense, but once we start going through the reading exercises, they'll start making a lot more sense. we've kind of already discussed the 4/4 time signature, but the main objective is just to equal up to 4. And you can use any combination of the notes above that we discussed to equal 4. And you'll see those coming up very soon. But just again, just to reemphasize, when you have the subdivisions here and the staff, you would have your measure. There should also be 5 of these little guys here, 5 of lines. I know I'm running out of space, but 5 lines there to make up your measure. Since these are quarter notes, it should take 4 of them to make one measure. Okay? All right. Now, the way that the notes are constructed, we need to assign, like I said, we have values for them, but we need to understand how to play each of the notes. So for the whole note, what would happen, and we'll demonstrate on this on the practice pad here in an interactive video here, but with a whole note, you would get one hit on your practice pad or snare drum, followed by 2, 3, and 4, which would be silent. And again, the whole note would take up the entire measure. So you would get one hit or beat, and the rest would be silent, equaling up to a total of 4. With the whole rest, basically you would just play the whole measure would be silent. Half would be half of what we have in the whole note. So you would get one beat and one silent part of silence, and it's going to take 2, if you go back and look at the chart, 2 half notes to make the whole note. So you can put 2 half notes in one measure. Half rest, which just means you get 2 counts of silence. Then the quarter note, it's kind of a 1-on-1 ratio. You'll get 1 beat for every quarter note you see, and with quarter rest you get 1 beat of silence. Eighth notes, we start getting a little more divided, a little more complicated. It's a half of a quarter note, so it takes 2 eighth notes to equal 1 quarter note. And what you do is you count each eighth note as a 1, and then the other note would be the and. So you'd have 1 and, 2 and, 3 and, 4 and. Eighth rest is a half beat of rest. And then the 16th note, we divide the 8th note into 2. So as you remember in our chart, if you want to scroll back up and look at it, each set of 8th notes would have 4 notes grouped with that, which would make up your 16 notes. Those are counted as 1 E and A. And like I said, it takes 4 16 notes to equal 1 quarter note. And the 16th rest is kind of a quarter of a rest. Okay? All right, now what we want to do is we want to start putting some of this into play when we go over to our practice pad in a little bit here. We'll do some exercises using the quarter notes. But right before we do that, I just want to briefly discuss the other time signatures that we'll be using in the course. Like I said, 4/4 is our main time signature that we're going to be using. If you think about a piece of music, just count it as 1, 2, 3, 4. For those of you already familiar with the drum set, 4/4 time would usually end up with something like a 1 and 3 on the the bass drum or kick drum, and 2 and 4 on the snare drum. But you do have other time signatures, and those are useful in music. Such as the 2/4, the 3/4, and the 6/8, which are other ones we'll be discussing. And those are the ones that are most likely to appear in popular music that most people play. There are other time signatures, but for the constraint of the course, we won't be discussing those at this time. But if you can play in those four right there, you're about 95% of the way already. And then once we do our reading exercises, we'll do a little bit with the metronome as well. All right, the next part of the lesson one was going to be the videos showing you our exercises here and showing you a little bit about how to use the metronome. All right, everybody, before we get going on our reading exercises and demos, I just wanted to take a quick minute to actually show you how to properly hold your stick and kind of the right settings for your either snare drum or practice pad. All right, first of all, you want your practice pad or snare drum to be set right about lap level. I like to have mine just a little bit above my leg here, or right at the point of my leg here. Also, my stool is letting me sit comfortably so that my legs are parallel to the ground, or maybe just a slight bit above that. I find that's very comfortable for me. And then the practice pad, you want to set it so that when you place your hand down, it's not parallel, it's a little bit under parallel, which I find comfortable for me. So when you're playing, you get a nice relaxed feel to it. As far as your stick, what you want to do to grip it properly, I would recommend just setting it down on the snare for a minute and then just picking it up. And however you naturally pick it up, it's a good way to hold your stick. But if you want to get technical about it, what you should do is grab it between your thumb, pointer finger, let your other finger just kind of naturally wrap around it. And you want your stick to be pointed palms down, hands down, and there should be a slight curve inwards of the stick that naturally follows, and then you have the next one, and you'll go with something like this. So when you actually play, you're going to be hitting, and this part, these two fingers here are kind of your fulcrum where the stick moves. You can see you can move the stick fairly well just like that, but you need your other fingers for support, so they just wrap around just like that. And this is called the match grip. Very important. You get a good play and you get a good rebound with that. Also, you get a good wrist action. That's why your palms are facing down, so you can get a good wrist action. Another variation of this grip, I would recommend using the match grip first, but you can also use the French grip, which is the same grip except you flip your thumbs up, and then you end up with a French grip. I would play most of them match grip to start off with, but French grip is something you can experiment with later. So that's a little bit about how the grips work. Before we actually get into our live demonstrations of the exercises and everything like that, I want to take some time to actually write out the notes in the exercise and the counts for each exercise. And this is something I recommend that you do, especially as a beginner, but even as you are more experienced with drumming and with drum music and music in general, I still think it's a good idea to write out the counts for each new piece that you're playing. I think it helps you understand the piece more, and it helps you work out some of the more complicated phrasings and things like that. Now, this one here shouldn't be too terribly complicated, especially once you understand it. But I think it's good exercise to go through and do this. So, if we're looking at our lesson 1, our first quarter note exercise here. First thing we want to keep in mind that we're in the time signature of 4/4. So you would see that right here, letting you know that. And we briefly covered again, but what 4/4 means is that you should have within your measure, you should have 4 beats in each measure, and those beats should equal up to 4, of course. So we're going for 4 and everything. And also the top note indicates how many beats per measure, and the bottom note indicates what kind of note we're using. In this case, we're going off the quarter note as our foundational note. So our first exercise would look something like this. All right, you got to know your note values, and we're going to be going through those. Easiest one to start with a quarter note because you get one hit every time that you see a quarter note. So basically, it's going to look like this. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So when we get to our demo, you'll see that every time that we have a quarter note, we're going to play. So we're going to end up tapping 4 times on our practice pad, on our snare drum, whatever you have to be using to do your exercises. And 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, here's something that you need to know too. When you get to the end of the line, there is often a marking here that lets you know what to do next. This marking right here, the double dot, just lets you know that you need to repeat this exercise from the beginning again, all the way back to the beginning. And you would basically do it all over again, go through the whole line, and then when you get to the end, that's when you can stop. So you're basically playing the whole line twice. All right, second line, we'll go something like this. 1, 2, 3. But remember, this is a quarter note rest. So it's going to be 4 to keep our measure all equaling out with a 4 time. But so what we do is we're going to play on our pad or snare drum, whatever you're using. 1, 2, 3, 3 hits. And this right here would be silent, so we wouldn't play anything. We would still count it because we got to keep time. We got to keep the rhythm going. Got to keep the piece going. But we're actually not going to play. We're resting there. And then, of course, this first exercises are very repetitive in nature, but it's going to end up being the same thing. And when you write the count surrounded by these parentheses here, that means rest, traditionally. So 1, 2, 3, 4 again, with 4 of the rest. 1, 2, 3, 4. Of course, again, we got the repeat. We're going to have the repeat on pretty much all of these exercises. All right, then you come to the next line. You can kind of guess what that's going to be. We're just going to have our 1, but it's going to be a rest. And then we're going to play 2, 3, and 4. Rest on 1, 2, 3, and 4. Rest on 1, 2, 3, 4. Rest on 1, 2, 3, and 4, and repeat. All right, I think we'll do a couple more. You should be getting the hang of it though, of what you need to do and how you need to do it. Like I said, I would, if this was me, I would either get a writing pad like I have and write out the counts, or I would print these things out on actual paper and I would write all these counts out. It's very, very helpful in the beginning to do these exercises, and I still do them with new pieces anyway, just because it helps me really see what's going on. That should be a 2. So on this exercise, we're resting on the 3. And you would continue on and do the same thing with all of them. I'll just go ahead and write them all out real quick for you while we're here. So this exercise, we're resting on the 2. Finish and repeat. Okay, this was on 1 and 3. Play on 1 and 3, rest on 2 and 4. And you would repeat that to the rest of the measure. On this exercise, you rest on 1 and 3. Play on 2 and 4. And then here, it's going to change up a little bit on you. Going to rest on the 1. Play the 2, 3, and 4 for the next 2 measures. And then the final measure will be 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right, so I hope that helped you see how this is played, first of all, and how it's written out. Please excuse my handwriting, but that's what we got from now. All right, let's move on to our next exercise. Now this one is a really good example of just using all the notes that we've been covering so far, whole, half, and quarter, to really get an understanding of how the note values work with these things here. So again, still in 4/4 time. Let me explain this here real quick too. When we get to our live demo, this will make more sense, but we're basing the quarter note off of 65 beats per minute, so that's what that means when you're setting up a metronome. But as far as our actual counts, see the first exercise here, first line, we have half notes. So remember, we have to equal up to 4. So the ways it's going to work is you're going to play once. You're going to get 1 tap on your snare practice pad, but the half note is equivalent of 2. So we'll have 2 there, but that second part is going to be silent. Excuse my handwriting there. Same thing with this next half note. We're going to play on the 3, but the 4 is going to remain silent. And it's really not silent, it's more of a sustain is what it is. But we don't have a lot of sustain in drum music, so what ends up happening is you just don't play that part. All right, we'll repeat again. So you can see how everything's got to equal up to 4 here. Sorry, that should be 3. 3 and then 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then 1, 2, 3, quarter note rest, silent. So for that measure, you would get 3 hits. Snare drum, snare drum, snare drum, nothing here, silent. Moving on to the next line here. Again, we've got a half note to begin. So the half note is equal to 2 counts. And we would have 1, 2, then we have a half rest. And that's going to be the equivalent of the 3 and the 4. So really, you would just get 1 hit in the beginning. It's going to repeat again for this one, as well for this one. And then for this final measure, we have 2, 3, and 4, 4 being silent. All right, we're going to flip it on exercise number 3. We're going to start off with 1, 2 beats of silence. We'll get a hit on the 3, and then the 4 again is going to be silent. And that would repeat for this one, and then again 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right, I hope that's starting to make a little bit more sense to you as far as how the notes work. But another example here, whole note. So whole note is equal to the whole entire 4 count. So we'll get 1 hit at the beginning, but 2, 3, and 4 are going to be silent. So same thing for this measure. All right, this measure got a quarter note, so we need to get 1 hit, 1 count, quarter rest, 1 rest, and then a half note would equal 3 and 4. And the point of this exercise is how you can write things different ways. This exercise right here, it's probably not the right way to do it. That's a little bit too much. It'd be better to use this if you wanted to write that phrase, but this is just helping you understand the values of the notes and the rest. And then our final measure, kind of a repeating theme here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 with the rest. All right, next line, and another whole note, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 hit, 2, 3, and 4 silent. Whole rest, again indicated by it being under the line, so it looks kind of like a hole. This whole measure is equal to 4, but it is silent. Then kind of repeating what the first measure was. And then you know what this should be. All right, kind of a combo exercise here. And the next line, we've got 4 quarter notes. So we would have 1, 2, 3, and 4. 2 half notes, 1 hit, rest, 3, rest, whole note, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 with the rest there. All right. So we'll go ahead and finish the rest here real quick. 2 half notes, so we get 1 hit, 2 rest, hit on a 3, 4 rest, 1 rest, 3 rest on 4. Again, just showing you how you can write things different ways. Those are approximately the same thing, just written different ways. 2, 3, 4. Mix it up a little bit. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then the last line, just moving things around a little bit. Rest on the 1, 2 hit, 3 silent, and then 4 will be silent because of the quarter note rest. Repeat it, and then you know 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, I hope that makes sense, and I hope that helps you understand a little bit more about how to write out counts on a piece of music and how the value of the notes work for whole, half, and quarter, and with their corresponding rest.